right. Hello, everybody. Happy Veterans Day. I don't know if we have any veterans on the call today, but actually, any veterans on the call? All right. Well, happy Veterans Day. Great to see you. I know we've got some great topic to talk about today. Looking forward to the dialogue. A quick reminder and kind of a little bit of a preparation. So we know we're going into kind of the really rough time of the year from a participation because everybody's doing their own thing. So we're going to kind of take a little bit of a pause, a little hiatus, if you will, in these months. So we do have a session next week. JP, who's on here, is going to do a session next week. One of our solution series sessions. So if you're not a member of the program, definitely join and take a look at that. In fact, I'm looking at the schedule. It is the 18th at noon Eastern time. Solution series there, and then we're gonna wait until after the Thanksgiving week. We're going to do our experience exchange to this meeting, but for next month, we're actually doing it right at the beginning of December. We're going to do it on the 3rd at 4 o'clock Eastern time, the experience exchange. So more will come out about that. And then that'll be the only thing we do in December. Give everybody, go back, chat, be with your families, hopefully before Thanksgiving, hopefully the flights are back to normal and the government's back open. I'm down there in Florida. You can tell I'm not at home. I'm down in Florida, so I hope to get back home at the end of this week because of the shutdown. Who
I
knows
hope
what's going
so.
to be
I'm flying
happening?
to Florida tomorrow. I don't want to be stuck down there with you. No.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but anyway, we've got a great set today and a great opportunity here. We're going to talk about the ROI of CX. It's kind of come up here and there over the time, but Brad's going to kick us off into some really discussion on this very important topic. I still, when I talk to other professionals in this space, it kind of goes back to where CX on the Rocks was formed. It's like, the noun of CX, like a role, a metric, those are the things still kind of struggling. But CX as a verb, as action, is more important now than ever. But we've a lot of us have fallen into that role of not being able to really show ROI because we focus more on measuring. And so I think it's a great conversation here about what is the really strong ROI of CX, and we'll be able to gauge that. If we have a few more people show up, we might break into breakout rooms. Otherwise, we may just keep this in one big kind of conversation. So as a reminder, when you're ready, if you want to raise your hand using the icon on the screen, that way we don't jump all over each other if we stay all together in one big group. Brad, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everybody. Brad Smith here. What I'm going to share with you guys today is a bit of a case study. Little bit about my background. I grew up in high technology and customer support and service. That's how I found my way to customer experience. And I oversaw global support teams at companies like Oracle and OpenWave and VeriSign. At Symantec, I kind of cut my teeth in all things customer experience and did a lot of journey mapping and business architecture design. And from Symantec, I became the VP of customer experience at Yahoo for 3.5 years, and then the executive vice president of customer experience for Sage Software, which is small business accounting software. And this is a case study from that tour of duty, if you will. One of the challenges that I realized after running a global CX program for a company, 3 times out, was the reality that if the C-suite doesn't understand the core value of what customer experience is helping them see and understand and act on it, that program is not going to be long for the world. And I know that when I think about customer experience, right, I typically think about 4 ROI buckets. That first ROI bucket is cost, right? Bad experiences cost money. It costs money in friction. It costs money at the front of the sales funnel and marketing funnel and the onboarding. Obviously, customer support and service calls, returns, rebates, warranties, all that kind of stuff. It's costly. So the more that you can improve the customer experience across that life cycle, obviously you're going to save some money. The second big bucket of ROI is revenue preservation. And this is all about customer churn, right? And having your customers spend less with you year over year and smaller, share of wallet and that type of thing. The third ROI bucket is all about revenue acceleration. And happy customers absolutely want to do more with you, right? So upsell, cross-sell potential, extended subscriptions, add-on, bolt-ons, all that kind of great stuff. And then the fourth bucket, which is a little bit more squishy, is all about positive brand awareness in the marketplace. And if you've got a really positive brand, you're going to have a higher Yelp scores and higher ratings as far as that stuff goes. It's going to be easier for you to acquire new customers because they're going to seek you out by name. It's going to be easier to acquire new employees. So with that kind of frame in mind, one of the things that I also recognize is that every company has the primary focus, the primary driver, the cultural currency that kind of helps it decide what it wants to be when it grows up. At Sage, we were focused on revenue and most importantly, reoccurring revenue and the quality of that reoccurring revenue over time. And so when I spoke to the executive team and I was trying to explain to them what we're seeing in our customer experience and where we need to focus, I'd have to put it into terms that made sense to them, right? And made sure that it resonated with that primary instinct, that cultural currency that kind of drives the ship. I've worked with other companies where margin and expense control was a thing, and EBITDA. I've worked with other companies where it was just simply growth and market share. I've worked with other companies and it was all about risk and risk management. So, understanding the cultural currency is a huge part of this communication endeavor. But the stage I'd like to set for you is this: after 3 or 4 different iterations, this became a routine quarterly report that we would run and send out to the C-suite. It was a 2 to 3 pager. And it had these spotlights on particular topics to kind of drive this conversation. But without us doing this proactive outreach, without us kind of demonstrating what we're doing unsolicited, then we're always on a defensive. We're always on our heels, right? We're constantly being asked, well, how many people do you have? And why do you have all those people? And what have you done for us lately? And all this kind of stuff versus here's what we're finding. Here's what it's going to take to fix it. And here's the results we're getting on the backside. So that's the story I'm about to share. But before I turn on my screen share and kind of walk you through it, I want to pause a second, first to pick up any kind of questions, and second, to invite my colleagues to chime in and, debate what I said or reinforce it from your own personal experiences.
I think you're right on, Brad. Those are the 4 classic business cases, if you will, that that I present with my customers when we're doing that sort of work. Either we're going to reduce the cost to serve customers without reducing the quality of service. We're going to get a greater share of their wallet through cross-sells, upsells, more business. We're going to, you called it revenue protection. I call it preventing customer churn. We're going to retain customers for longer periods of time, and then make it easier to acquire customers, either acquire more customers or reduce the cost to acquire customers. That customer acquisition cost, or CAC, is a very important metric for SaaS and subscription companies.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Any
Yeah.
other thought?
Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I'm on mute. I think this is really valuable, and I think that like one build I make, and you may address this in your comments, Brad, is
Yeah.
I think there's an important distinction between the upfront business case and how you tell the story and ongoing tracking of value realization, and being able to link the efforts you're investing into measurable improvements that are linking CX metrics, like experience metrics, to business outcomes, like what you just talked about are business outcomes. A lot of times companies focus on the upfront business case and may actually overcomplicate the business case. And then what really matters is the ability to measure ongoing value realization and have a credible story that you move the needle on your outcome metrics, because that sustains executive commitment and more money. Think of it, I encourage clients always to think of it like think like a venture capitalist. What do you need to do to get the next bucket of money? And if you can't show progress, your money faucet is off.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Yeah. I think having a consultant mindset, even if you're working full-time inside of a company, is always a healthy kind of thing to do there. All right, well, let's kind of dive in, and I'll give you a tour of what I created, and love to pick up your thoughts and comments on it. So this is laid out on a Miro board for us, so we can zoom in and zoom out. It's basically, this particular example is a 3-page, written in classic letter form, right? And so let's go ahead and zoom into the sections. The first section was, again, this was a quarterly report. And what we're trying to look at is what's happening with churn, okay? And what we saw here, and this was a British company, so it's all in pounds, right? We built these charts to kind of show, of the revenue that we are chasing in FY15, how much of it's going to come from reoccurring, and that was from finances numbers, not mine. How much of it's going to be reoccurring growth, organic growth, and then how much of it do we have to replace the churn that we lost from FY14, and then non-reoccurring, which is net new. So we would have to backfill 142 million pounds just to hit our growth targets, because that's what we lost in customer churn. The average cost to acquire a new customer for that many customers is another whopping 233 million. So this is a heck of a divot, right? I've got to take whatever new customer acquisition marketing budget that we had allocated for growth in FY15, and I've got to steal away from that budget and spend it to buy back the customers that I've lost. So what happens is that spend per average customer dilutes, right? If it costs me on average $25 to win over a new account, now I'm only got $12 to spend, right? So there's a dilution problem here. So that's the first big aha, right? We've lost this revenue, we need to replace it, and we're going to have to spend marketing dollars to replace that revenue. So let's call this in the court of law Exhibit A, right? Exhibit B is, what that new customer acquisition budget, what's really going to happen here, right? And the simple truth is that it wasn't a big budget to begin with. So we're spending the lion's share of that new customer acquisition budget just to replace churn. So we're forfeiting the ability to grow because we're having to spend this money in such a way, right? And this is just a compounding, little table here to help really spin out what's the 3-year total loss looking like at this current churn rate, right? If we don't arrest this churn, what's it going to do to the business? And our public shareholders expect us to grow year over year at a particular rate, and this is absolutely, stealing that ability for us to grow. The other thing is that the company, and I've seen this a lot, a company had a really savvy way to make the C-suite and the board of directors smile, because they would spin the retention numbers on a monthly renewal or a monthly retention, right? But the simple truth is that if you're, at a 98% renewal rate each month, you cross that over a 12-month period, you're actually only at a 78% annual. So because of someone else in the company decided to spin the metrics in a particular way, most people had no idea the hidden cost of churn at the end of a fiscal year. So I just want to press this point really, really hard. It's really, you can feel really proud. Oh, we have a 93% monthly renewal rate. That's amazing. That means you're losing 7% month over month, right? So be careful the numbers you spin, be careful the numbers you share, because you might drive a belief system that everything's fine. Okay, so this first, 1, 2, 3 punch, does this make sense to everybody? Any comments or questions about this one before we go to page 2?
I think your point is an excellent one. I mean, your budget is based on annualized, and that should always be the first question. is how we, because your monthly may just reflect your current forecast and not your annualized budget. I think the second piece you bring up is that cost of acquisition is very, very important. In simple terms, you have a hole in your bucket, and you're gonna have to spend you're gonna have to spend your way out of it if you don't fix your retention. And for most companies, that's unsustainable.
Not to mention the fact that you're creating a buzz on the street that people don't want to work with you. So now your marketing dollar has to pierce all that negative energy and those poor ratings to still land a new acquisition. So it's a double triple whammy, right?
Well, exactly. It's not just a volume game from an acquisition perspective, but it's that average spend per customer you bring in may not be as good as the one you just lost.
So next, to really kind of drive home a point. So this is where, I'm certain we could have an entire afternoon conversation and nothing about the merits of Net Promoter is terrible, Net Promoter is wonderful. I do know this, it's easy to explain Net Promoter to executives and paint a really nice picture. And so this picture here is exactly that. What I'm showing here is all things equal, the customers who gave me a promoter score over a 12-month period for them to have an opportunity to renew, we saw a 91% renewal rate for our promoters. We saw a 90% renewal rate for our passives, and we saw an 83% renewal rate for our detractors. So I don't care who you are, I don't care what your bias is around Net Promoter. This is so black and white. This is impossible not to see. I don't know much. Detractors don't want to renew. Promoters want to renew more. Maybe, I have an idea. Maybe we need to get more promoters. There's an idea. What do you say, guys? Huh? And then to pivot this thing on its head, let's look at their spending profiles. So, of those people that we kept, how many spent the same? How many spent more? How many spent less? And gosh, wouldn't you know it, the promoters are performing much, much higher than the other two cohorts. So promoters not only tend to renew, they tend to spend more. So for lack of any other guidance, I suggest whatever we can do to drive and grow more promoters, more of that, and whatever's triggering detractors, less of that. How's that for a strategy? So from here, we come down to here. And now we get to start to play the what if games. Hypothetically speaking, based upon this data, if I can increase the overall Net Promoter Score by only 10 points, what would that look like? What would that look like over the course of the next year? What would we see in reduced churn? And what would we see in increased ROI, share wallet spend? And by the way, the entire C-suite has a gun to their head to grow 8% year over year. How are you going to do that, kids? I think maybe there's a clue here. It smells truthy to me. There's something here maybe, right? And then finally, what is driving the detractors, right? And again, by doing a lot of different voice of customer analytics and asking, what is the satisfaction drivers and what are our different scores and the cohorts, and really diving into what are the people who give us a score of 6 versus a 7 versus an 8, what do they say? We shake this out, and there's really three big things here, right? Pricing and affordability is a big issue. Call center and customer support is a big issue, and product usability is a big issue. But what we're really seeing is customer onboarding. We have a failure to thrive. We're selling these products, and in the first 6 months, customers develop a very strong signature of they're getting the product, they're mastering it, they're realizing value from it, or they're failing, and they're dropping out. The other thing that we saw was this dichotomy, right? In the Net Promoter Scores, 91% of the promoters called out customer support as something really, really positive. And 60% of the detractors called out customer support as something really, really negative. And so this draws the meta theme of consistency. You've got to have a masterful, consistent customer support and service experience, number one. Number two, as I double clicked into this, the root cause of the case really drove the Net Promoter Score. They could have had a great customer support experience, but they ran into this impossible bug. And because the product was buggy, that's what drove most of the detractor traffic. But if you were blessed not to hit that bug, all things equal, things were pretty good. So this was 1 part customer support story to go figure out and 2-part product bug story to figure out. So let me just pause here for a quick second on page 2. And how are we prosecuting the case? How are you guys feeling?
I would absolutely yeah, clap for you as I just saw it go across the screen. Um, I would say I've seen very similar trends in the places that I've worked and worked with. I think what's key for people to realize is that with these NPS and other metrics and feedback, they have to be closing the loop in order to do this. This is not automatic or magical by itself.
No, this is a lot of hard work putting stuff together to build this case for sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Stacy. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on?
Yeah, I would say that this really underscores the importance of everyone playing well together, the way you articulated it. Especially when you talk about the contact center, in most cases, they don't drive their own volume. And if you don't articulate that product and other things are driving that volume, then you're only left with the detractor theme of what happens when they contact the contact center, not why, which is really that root cause for the company.
The why is a big deal.
Yeah, I think I've seen this too, Brad, and not knowing exactly what you're going on to page 3, so it may go this direction, but we were able to even then predict, customer effort score as it predicted the likelihood of Net Promoter Score. And then
Sure.
the idea being if people were like, well, because one of the complaints about Net Promoter Score, it's not actionable, et cetera. Well, when they work together in concert, now you're looking, oh, well, I know what they're doing. And this goes back into what Dave
Yeah.
talks a lot about journey map. What journeys are painful because that pain is creating detractors and creating churn. So
No, I grew up. I got my pilot's license before my driver's license, and when we have this conversation about Net Promoter as a standalone, unactionable metric, it's like, okay, fine, you're the pilot. You're flying this United flight across the country back home. You get to choose one instrument. You want airspeed, altitude, or fuel? You pick. But that's the only one instrument you're allowed to use.
yeah.
How is this a good idea? Right? All right, page 3. This really got into, I wanted to paint a picture of this problem with this product that was failing, right? And I really wanted to show, here's the total cost to acquire this customer, right? And we're spending so much money to acquire them. It's a 2-year ROI payback. So on top of you're losing your customers, and on top of you got to pay to replace them, the payback on this particular product line is a 2-year ROI. So we've got to help this customer stay with us for at least 2 years just to recoup our initial product development and product marketing and total cost of sales, et cetera, right? And what I'm showing here is, taking cohorts and taking windows of time and kind of showing, what's the impact and where does the Net Promoter Score against the churn rate score against a hard dollar impact score land, right? And the problem this company had, and so many companies have it, they bought the product. Our job's done. Everybody go home. Let's go celebrate. Yay, right? No, dude, this is a subscription service. The product, the adventure starts once they set up their accounts and start to use the product. That's what everybody's got to show up and do the work of the work, right? And so this attitude of the sales is behind us and all we care about is how many sales do we get, how many new customers do we acquire, but nothing about post-purchase, post-onboarding, that first 6 to 12 months, what's happening there. This is where I really wanted to draw this conversation forward and kind of explain to them this impact statement. So, these are some talking points, some things that we've learned. doing some detailed analysis, what the data suggests, when that stability thing happens. And then down here is just, and we always ended every communication guide with, what have we done for you lately, right? We ran a proactive customer service outreach program, and it successfully improved renewal rates by 12 to 14%. We successfully ran an online e-learnings program, and we found that if we can teach them to use the e-learnings university stuff in the first 3 months, typically it improves renewal rates dramatically. Active business cases, those who use support versus don't use support at all, we saw a big improvement. Those who use our online peer-to-peer support communities, we saw a big improvement. We changed some of the way the product flows out. We saw improvements there, and we had a callback program, restroom customers, etc. But the point here is that, in previous months, we told you these things, and here's what we did about it. And now we're going to take credit for those things. So given the fact that we can demonstrate an ability to see, act, and affect positive change, work with us on these things that we just suggested. So that's basically how this 3-pager kind of worked. But I think the key is that, we got into this cadence of 3 big points per page. We got into a cadence of using numbers that the executives we were talking to live and die by, but showing them the impact of those numbers in a different way. And we also worked really hard to make sure that it was actionable and specific. Here's not only the problem, but here's something that we believe has the greatest chance to affect change. So that was basically the snapshot conversation I wanted to have today. And I'd love to pick up any questions, comments, or thoughts.
I love your point about, and think about airlines, right? When we talk about it costs the same amount of money to fly a plane, whether it's full or not. So the plane has to be full, which to me is like the $1,900 over 24 months it takes to recoup that money for a customer.
Right.
And not every company, or not, I won't say not every company, but not everyone's always aware of that piece. Because I think you're spot on. It's we made the sale, what happens next? Well, the sale wasn't free. And it's that sort of education, I think, is the first starting point of what does it cost to acquire a customer and why these other things have to work in order for us to make money.
Yeah, one phenomena that I've seen in a lot of different industries, and it's interesting that this shows up in B2B SaaS, Brad's been talking about, as well as like consumer healthcare or retail or other markets that are different, is like the first 90 days after someone becomes a customer are critical to the lifetime value. And it's interesting you focused on lifetime value on onboarding, Brad, because I've seen that come up over and over and over again. That like whether you're in like so CX and loyalty and experience, they all come together around like how do you make that initial experience right after they join? And a lot of it is actually teaching them to behave the right way.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. I could not agree with you more. And we found if we can teach them how to use our online support well, if we could teach them how to take advantage of the peer-to-peer online communities, if we could teach them to take advantage of the e-learnings anytime tutorials, we'd lock them in for 3 years easy until a significant life event, kicks them off.
The same thing's true in a retail loyalty program and a healthcare loyalty program, in telecom. Like if you want to obviously acquire the right customers, but like even things like SAP and Adobe, like if you don't get the onboarding right, there's a massive value erosion if you don't engage the customers the right way up front. Like hundreds of millions per customer gets lost if they don't get that right.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I used to, so I worked at a telecommunications company, and then I worked at a financial services company running their CX programs back to back. And I was running survival curves, new customer survival curves for the telecommunications company. And it showed that declination. It showed a spike, for the 30 days mark of churn based on some of those variables that you talked about. And I ran it again at the financial services company, and it worked the same way. The difference was the scale was it was months at the telecom company, it was years at the financial services company, but it was the same issue as like at 3 month mark in telecommunications was like the 3 year mark of lifetime value at the financial services. It's just the timelines were different. So it was amazing that it just repeated itself so actively across, very different industries in that context.
Yeah, you can't sit on it. You got to get them onboarded and launched quickly. The sale is
Yep.
just, okay, high five, move on, but they got to use it.
So one of the analogies that I seem to lean into all the time is I believe there might be a chromosomal challenge with CX professionals because we're obsessed with the big picture. We like to look at a telescope and see, 10,000 light years out and see that star shining and try to understand the universe. And then we're also obsessed with the micro, and we're looking at a microscope, and we're looking at, well, of the 14 customers we onboarded on June 14th, how many are still here, and what did they experience, and what was the so that macro and micro is like, a lot of CX people are. But when you're talking to a sales team, their focal range is a 13-week march through the quarter. And when you talk to a product marketing team or a marketing team, they're thinking about what campaigns are in market and what are the next campaigns coming up. And when you talk to customer support and service people, they're thinking about average hold times and how many cases they manage. So like shifting your time horizon to help them widen their aperture and understand a bigger picture, but then also speaking in a way that they can action it in their day-to-day. I think that's a lot of the art and science that I was hoping to tease out of today's conversation.
What you highlighted with this client, that getting them aligned around an outcome metric around the impact of retention and retained revenue, right?
Yeah.
Allowed you to bridge marketing, sales, customer service, everyone to a common way of looking at the world. Like how does this affect marketing? How does this affect sales? How does this affect, there was a translation to get them all unified around the same outcome.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And that was the happy byproduct after we published and prosecuted this report, because we had something to say to everybody at the C-suite, right? But it's so easy to say, we made the sale, who cares what happens 2 months post-sales? But because you don't care about that, it's triggering churn. And because you're triggering churn, you're forfeiting the opportunity to grow next year because you're having to waste so much of your new customer acquisition budget just to fill the divot versus you could have stopped all of this right up front, So
we just mapped an end-to-end journey for a B2B SaaS company. And they had a real problem in onboarding. Their customers are learning that the product can actually do what sales said it could do.
Yeah.
And JP's head just exploded. And this company is very, very focused on share of wallet right now, cross sells and upsells. And so this is a big, I'm doing the final report tomorrow. It's going to be a big learning moment for the sales team that, you poisoned the well. You made the sale, and then you handed it over to the onboarding and support teams to go save the day. But you've now poisoned the well, and the trust is broken, and you're not going to have as easy a time getting that cross-sell, upsell.
No.
And I'm sure you've got some piece in there about perverse incentives that got them to this point.
Yeah, we got, I got a customer video clip from when I did the research, and the customer says, yeah, the greed from the salesperson, it was a punch in the throat.
Oh my God. That's incredible.
I don't have to say anything. I just play the customer video.
It just, shocker.
Yeah. So anyhow, I think that kind of, that any calls, any questions from anybody else? Does this make sense on an approach to take?
Curious if anybody else has, their own kind of examples of this. I know many of you guys that are on are in the biz and or also consulting with other companies. What kind of things are you seeing that are similar to this that drive value, maybe resonate most with organizations you're working with?
I think in my case, what I have seen is that exactly the opposite. Many CXers not following this financial path, which is the right one. So every time that they try to knock the door of a C-suite without the financials, they get frustrated because they're not speaking their language. And this, to me, is the first lesson in customer experience. You cannot speak your own language. You have to speak your customer's language.
Yeah.
But I don't know, somehow they forget the first lesson and they go and try to speak their own language, which again will only turn into frustration.
How many
Yeah.
times do we have to see research that customer experience teams that don't focus on outcomes get resources cut? And yet we keep seeing that movie over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges we have in that is we have a lot of accidental CX people.
Yeah.
And they don't know, right? That's one of the opportunities we have to educate those folks. But we have a lot of folks who maybe they were in the contact center and now they're saying, "Oh, go run the CX," and the issue may be they think it's running a survey. That's CX, and so yeah,
Yeah.
it's not. It's so much deeper than that.
This misconcept between, I would say, customer support or customer service and CX definitely kills all the value that CX brings to the table. And when you were raised under this concept that you need to keep, that you have to go after operational metrics such as AHT or volumes or tickets or whatever it is, kind of a flipping or changing this mindset is quite challenging. Because all of a sudden you become a leader and you now have the title of CX, but you do not truly know what CX means.
Well, and
Yeah.
I also think you tripped across something important here. It's easy for a customer experience team to just assume everybody sees what I see, and everybody knows what a
That
negative
part.
Net promoter trend means and how dangerous it is. So there's no need to like tell the rest of that story, because I'm sure everybody's working from exactly the same page as my perspective. And I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls for sure.
Yeah, and I think the
Absolutely.
ability to translate those data into terms that, again, to Camilla's point, the customer, the C-suite can actually understand is just a huge missing link here. And I think that's a contributing factor to why we're seeing so many CXO roles disappear or get absorbed into more generalized analytics functions right now.
Hmm.
James, another thing that really resonated with me from like our conversation, like James and my podcast just dropped this week. Um,
Yeah, watch it. It's awesome.
right? And there's been a few podcast guests in this audience, by the way, just a few. But the what jumped out at me that's relevant to what we're talking about here, James, is like your whole customer centric versus customer driven versus, customer tolerant. And like the difference between customer centric and customer driven, the customer driven one is more proactive, anticipating. Customer centric may actually overdo customization or overdo to fix problems. So I'd love to get your thoughts on like how do the metrics that a customer driven versus customer centric or tolerant leader, like is there a noticeable pattern in the types of outcomes or way they use data for storytelling and for data for getting focused on the right things?
Yeah, it's a great question. Not necessarily in terms of like, are there preferred five metrics for one versus another, but directionally, one of the things that I see is that, and to Matt's point, I separate customer centric as a positive thing, still good, but it tends to be more focused on pleasing or checking the boxes of the demands of the customer today. And the difference between being customer centric and customer driven is customer driven leaders, teams, and cultures are really rabid, for want of a better word, about getting their arms around as much data as possible to be able to forecast who's the customer for the future. Because this whole concept that I call politely challenging the customer is really critical right now to preserving and maintaining market share in a hyper competitive environment. So if you're only meeting the demands of the customer today and you're not using the data to forecast, which, you know, to some extent it's a gamble, right? So you have to make an educated gamble on where the market's going and when the right time is to politely challenge that customer on their standard practices.
Yeah, I think I like the old saying, you teach customers how to treat you, right?
Mm.
And your most perfect customer that you have today, if you were to call them out and build a profile of what they look like, and they, you know, they buy this kind of stuff and they renew at this rate and they give me these net promoter scores and they're a big referral customer, and chances are they didn't fall out of the sky that way, right? You nurtured them. So I think you got a really great point there, James.
And sometimes, based on your cost to serve, you have to fire certain customers.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're winding down on time, and JP, why don't you give us just a little bit of a sneak peek on what we're going to talk about next week in the solution series?
So we're going to talk about from AI anxiety to AI advantage, how to leverage it to improve your business. You know,
Nice.
so don't run from it, run to it, because it's here. And so that's what we're going to get into, talk a little bit about that, and hopefully make your Mondays a little bit better.
Love it.
All right.
Looking forward to that.
Well, thank you everybody for joining. This is a great conversation. Thanks, Brad, for leading the discussion. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. We'll look for you next week on JP's Solution Series event, and we'll see you again in December for one event. And then we're going to really kick it off with some really new stuff in 2026, and look forward to sharing more about that outlook as we go. So thanks for coming. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
Good job,
everybody.
Brad. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks. Bye.